and welcome everyone. Welcome to What's New in Power Automate and Approval Workflows. My name is Monica Ahuja and I'm here with Ayrton and Enrico, and we all work in Business Central engineering team. Together between the three of us, we are going to talk about the new Power Automate actions that we have introduced in this wave, and also the general improvements that we have made in the Business Central connector for Power Automate, along with in-detail session on simplified approval templates. Let's start with a quick refresher on what the Power Platform and Dynamics 365 Business Central offer together. As we all know, Power Platform is the world's most complete set of integrated low-code development tools. But today we are going to focus on Power Automate, where any customer and partner is empowered to create automated sequence of tasks using flows. Power Platform offers 900 plus built-in connectivities for cloud services, files, web APIs, etc. And of course, it includes Business Central. But talking specifically about Power Automate, there are these three ways to start using Power Automate using Business Central. There's the approval workflow templates, there is the automated flows, and then there is the manual flows. But let's talk about what's new in this wave. In this release, we have introduced two new Power Automate actions. These actions are called Get Adaptive Card and Get URL. You can use Power Automate to post adaptive card and Business Central links to Business Central records. Now you can automate enriching conversations with useful insights and post these cards in Teams, Outlook, or any other Microsoft 365 collaborative platform. Let's talk about Get Adaptive Card action in detail. So this adaptive card action actually creates an adaptive card for a Business Central URL. Please note that the layout, content, and the AL customizations that you have applied for cards that you have been using in Business Central teams also apply for cards in Power Automate. These cards also respects users' permissions. The Get Adaptive Card action works smoothly with all kind of flows, including instant, automate, or template flows. Let's go in detail and see some technical insights on how to use this action. So this action requires two inputs, the input URL and the input target app. The input URL syntax needs to have a domain that is a valid Business Central domain, and also it needs to specify where the record is located, which company, which environment, which organization, along with the page ID and the record ID in the URL. Once you specify the correct URL syntax, then you can also specify where the adaptive card needs to go and land. So that means where it should be destined to. This input can be provided in Target app. So the two options for Target apps are Teams and others. Once you have used the Teams Target app, that means you will end up with an adaptive card that has an action that will actually open inside an embedded frame inside Teams. But if you select the Target app others, then it will just open the details view in a browser. The output of this action is an adaptive card in a JSON string format. Let's talk about the other action, which is also new in this way, which is the Get URL action. As the name suggests, it gets the URL, a web client URL for a Business Central record. It also works with all kind of flows, instant, automate, and hybrid, and it enables more scenarios for Outlook. For example, you can actually paste a link now along with a message using the flow for Outlook. When we go into the technical insights for this action requires environment, company, page, and row ID as input. If you don't know a page, how to get the page for a certain record or how to get the row ID, you can also use the page inspector from Business Central Web Client and get those values. The output of this action is a string formatted web client URL that can be used as an input, and we also recommend it to use as an input for Get Adaptive Card action. Let's see the demo of these two new actions in Power Automate. In this demo, we have already created a flow that is responsible to post the details of a sales order whenever a sales order is created for a VIP customer. Let's see the details of this step by step. So we have a trigger about when a sales order is created. We actually go ahead and get that sales order to get the details for which customer the sales order was created. Once we get the customer, then we figure out on a condition whether the customer is VIP or not. If the condition is met, we now go ahead and actually use the 2 new Power Automate actions that has been introduced in this release. So we get the URL for the sales order that was created by getting the ID of the sales order from the trigger for the same environment and company. And we use the page number 42, which is the page number for sales order. This action will give me output for web client URL. That output can be used as an input in the next action called get adaptive cart. Once we have set the input for the URL, we can also set the input for target app. As we can see, the options for setting target app is Teams or others, and depending on it, we'll see actions respectively. Once we have done that, we can just go ahead and use the output from this trigger adaptive cart to post a card in the chat or channel in the team. Let's just test this. So now the flow has been set up. So I'm in Business Central and we are going to create a sales order for a VIP customer. Let's just go ahead and do this. So I'll click on New on the sales order list and select the customer who's a VIP customer. As per the condition on my flow, I know that School of Fine Art is a VIP customer. So just went ahead and created a sales order. Let me add the line items. So let's add a Washington fancy chair. They ordered one of that. We can just now add the unit price. So once we have filled all the mandatory fields, then our sales order is successfully created. And now we should be expecting the flow to trigger. Indeed, I just got a message in the automations channel inside Teams saying that a sales order has been created for the customer. And we can see that the card looks as similar as we have seen in the Teams Business Central app for Teams. And let's go ahead and click details on it. Since we selected the target app for Teams for this flow, then we can see that the details actually open inside Teams. And from here on, we can just go ahead and edit as per the permissions of the user. These were the 2 new actions that we introduced in this wave, and this was the demo for it. Now I'm going to hand over to Enrico, who will talk about the general improvements that we have made in Business Central App Connector.
Thank you, Monica. So I'm going to talk about some general improvements in the connector. I'm going to start with some improvements that we did at the beginning of this release, but I still want to recap them and focus on them for just a few seconds. So first of all, we renamed the connector to Dynamics 365 Business Central. We also added support for nested entities for the find records action. So this action was always able to retrieve related records by using a filter query. In the example in my screenshot, you can see I'm filtering on the document ID to get the sales invoice lines. So we did some improvements on the API level because this was causing some issues for some specific endpoints. Now that's no longer the case. We also had the support for larger data sets. So when you're using the find records action, you can use the 3 dots menu and the settings for the action to specify a pagination setting. Until this change, you were able only to retrieve 1,000 records using the Power Automate connector. Now you can actually retrieve up to 100,000. We still suggest you try to limit the number of records you retrieve, but in case your application needs more records, then you can do it now. We also discontinued the V1 endpoints. These are all endpoints that have been deprecated for a long time. You would have already been notified if you were affected, but it was just a small number of users. I also want to mention a few newer improvements that we introduced in the very last months. So first of all, we have now captions for fields in both Power Automate and Power Apps. Before this change, you would see just the API name, which was always in English, and it looks just a bit mechanical. Now you can actually see the caption and the translation. This reflects the languages you have installed in Business Central. So if your Business Central supports the language you're using in Power Automate and Power Apps, you will see translations. In Power Apps, we also added support for free text search. So now you can search, for example, the name of your customer inside the list of customers in Power Apps, and you'll find your result. One larger feature we introduced this wave is support for media and attachments in the Power Automate and Power Apps connector. We introduced 2 new actions in Power Automate: get an image file or document, and update an image file or document. This allows you to access any blob field exposed in your APIs in Business Central. These include both out-of-the-box APIs, for example, APIs v2, but also partner APIs that you might have in your tenant. This allows you to access, for example, item images or PDF documents. I want to focus your attention on attachments and document attachments. So we always had an API called attachments that was actually incoming documents. We got some observations from partners to actually include more APIs to access the actual document attachments. We introduced this. So now from this release, you can both get the incoming documents under the name attachments and also the document attachments. On the right, you can see the action get an image file or document in my screenshot. There is a small folder there, which allows you to explore the endpoints available in the Business Central API route that you chose. This makes it easier to find the image file or document that you want to interact with. We also have support for images in Power Apps. So as you can see in my screenshot, you can build a Power App that includes pictures, for example, of your customers or of your items. This only works for APIs that have the blob field in the main API, and where the blob field is called either image or picture. That unfortunately means it doesn't work for most of our out-of-the-box APIs. But if you build a custom APIs, then you can use that with this new feature. And I'm going to demo some of these features so you can see them in action. So I'm now in Power Automate. I created a flow called update new customer's image. For the interest of time, I already made the flow. And what this does is, whenever a new record is created inside Business Central, we get the information about the customer, and we find an image to upload from OneDrive. You can, of course, use any other product, Microsoft or third party, as long as it has a connector in Power Automate. And as Monica mentioned, we have more than 900 connectors, so you will be able to access a lot of different products. And here you can see the new action, update an image file or document. As you can see here, we are setting all the fields that are the same as the other Business Central actions, such as environment name, company, and API category. We have this path, which, as I mentioned earlier, can be accessed using the Endpoint Explorer here. So for example, in our case, we will want customers. And for the customer, you can choose just a picture. As you can see here, I just have the ID for customer and the content to upload. So let's see that in action. I will move to Business Central, and I will create a new customer here. Let's just call it launch event. As you can see, the customer has no picture. So let's see if my flow works. It's going to take a few seconds. So meanwhile, I want to show you how Power Apps can actually show the images from your custom APIs. I will quickly create a new Power App based on my Business Central endpoints. I have a custom endpoint which can display customers with images. So when I connect to this endpoint, Power Apps has already built template that shows me the basic fields from my customer, and this includes the image as well. As you can see, I have a list of customers here with their images. I can now search for launch event. And as you can see, the customer I created earlier has now an image uploaded. That meant my flow run managed to upload the image, and Power Apps can see this image in action. There is one more change I want to mention. So we introduced environment and company everywhere in our Business Central connector for Power Automate. What does this mean? If you wanted to distribute a flow in a different Business Central environment or company, you would have to change the value of environment and company in all your actions and in the trigger connecting to Business Central. That's until today. You could work around that using the for a selected record trigger, but all the other triggers would not allow this. This changed since this release. So now all our Business Central triggers make environment and company context available, which means you can build your flow so that you need only to change environment and company once in the trigger, and all the other actions will just follow with the new environment and company. This has very powerful consequences because it means it's going to be much easier for you as a partner or as a maker to create and distribute your flows in different Business Central environments and companies. We will see a very nice application of this in a few minutes, shown to us by Ayrton.
Yeah, thank you, Enrico. So in this release, we're making some big changes to how request approval workflows work. And this is going to involve some of the changes that Enrico and Monica have just demonstrated. All right, so the first topic that we're going to cover is the new request approval workflow templates. So for those of you that have used the request approval flow system before, then you'll know that our existing setup involves like a big clunky flowchart that requires the customer to enter some values in various fields. It's kind of difficult for them to know what they should enter and where they should set this up. And our current request approval flow templates only have one flow, which is to request approval from an approver and then send a notification via Outlook. So they're kind of lacking in variety and flexibility. So in this release, we're delivering new simplified templates. And these simplified templates are going to allow you to create document approval workflows with just a couple of clicks. And there's no need for you to even leave Business Central. So you can get started with document approval straight away. And all of these new templates are activated by a new type of custom action, which you can include in your own pages and of course support the in-client designer. So we'll start with the first demo of request approval. So now I'm on the sales invoice card and I would like to make an approval request for this sales invoice. So if I just click send approval, then you can see that I haven't actually set up a workflow approval yet. So I need to go and set up my workflow so that I can send an approval request. So if I go to Actions, Request Approval, Power Automate, then if you've used this before, you recognize this actions, Create a Power Automate approval flow. And usually when you click this, it will take you out to Power Automate where you're presented with the workflow template flowchart. But this time, when I click this, I'm shown the new simplified template experience. And I'm presented with a gallery of request approval workflow templates. So in this preview build, we only have one workflow template available, but by the time you're watching this, there'll be many workflow templates available with integrations with products such as Microsoft Teams. So let's just get started with the template that is available today, which is request approval for a Dynamics 365 Business Central sales invoice. So the first thing that I need to do is set up the connections, but this has already been done for me, so I'm just going to skip to the next step, which is to enter the information required by the template. So I need to choose which environment this workflow is going to run in, and currently I'm in the sandbox, so we'll pick sandbox. And I need to choose the company that this approval is going to run against, so the sales invoice is in Cronus, and we'll pick this one. And I need to choose somebody to actually perform the approval, right? So in this case, we'll choose Eric, who is the finance manager for this company. So now all I need to do is click Create Flow. And that's it. The workflow has been added successfully. That is the only step that I need to perform to actually create a document approval workflow. So let's just take a step out to Power Automate and take a look at how this workflow runs. And now I'm presented with the flow that I just created. So if I go to edit this flow, then you can see that the flow that we created is very similar to the one that we have today, but there's a couple of key differences. So the changes that Enrico talked about regarding the environment and company output have been adopted as part of this template. So you may have noticed that when I set up the template, I only needed to enter the environment and company once. In the old experience, you needed to go to every single action and choose the environment and company. But in this case, the environment and company have been taken from the output of the trigger. So there's no need for anyone to come in here and set this up. And that's been applied to all of the actions that are part of the workflow. So if I go back to Business Central and say, okay, and let's send an approval request. So now when I click send approval request, you can see that the status of the document has changed to pending approval, and I was able to set this up in just a couple of seconds. So in this release, we've delivered a range of templates to inspire you to build instant flows. So I'm just going to demonstrate that quickly as well. So you can see here that I'm on the customer card, and I would like to get started with using instant flows to boost my productivity. So if I open up the Automate menu, I don't actually have any instant flows. And usually what I would do is go to the Power Automate menu and click Create a Flow. And this would take me to the Power Automate client where I need to click around, see if I can find a template, maybe build my own flow. It might take some time for me to get set up with this, and it's difficult if I've never used it before, if I'm a first-time user. So in this case, I'm going to click Create a Flow. But as with the request approval action, it's opened up the Instant Flow template gallery. So again, when you're watching this, you'll be presented with a selection of templates to create instant flows. But in this preview build, I just have the one, which is block the selected customer in Dynamics 365 Business Central. So let's get started with this instant flow template. When I click through, I'm presented with the connection setup again, but I'm going to rename this flow so that I can find it easily in the Automate menu. So I've created this flow, block this customer, click Next. And all I need to do is choose the person that should be notified when a customer is blocked. So let's go with Eric again, because he's a familiar face. So I've created this, I've set up the flow, and now I'm just going to create the flow. And you can see that it was added successfully. So now I should be able to find this flow in the Automate menu. So when I go to the Automate menu, I can see my new instant flow, block this customer. And when I click this flow, it opens up the flow experience inside Business Central. So I don't even need to leave Business Central to get started using instant flows. So the last thing that I want to talk about is where these flows are actually saved. So if you had a keen eye in the previous demo, then you may have noticed that the flows that I created were not actually in the Contoso default environment. So in Power Platform, you can have multiple environments where you can store things like Power Automate flows and Power Apps. And in your setup, if it's more complicated, you may have multiple Power Platform environments and environments that are visible to different users. And one of the biggest requests that we've gotten from customers is, how can I set up Business Central to connect to different Power Platform environments? And in this case, I've actually created these flows in the custom environment that I set up. The final thing that I want to talk about is the ability to choose which Power Platform environment you're connected to in Business Central. So we've introduced a new wizard in Assisted Setup to enable you to make this choice. And you can choose this setting on a global basis if you're the administrator, or on a per user basis if your users need to access different environments. And this choice affects the flows that are created in the Automate group, and also request approval flows which are created by the request approval action. So I'll just quickly show you how this works as well. Let's go to the Assisted Setup page. And now in this list, we have a new wizard called Power Automate Environment. And like I demonstrated before, the flows that I created are already in the custom environment. So you can see that I've already actually run this wizard, but we'll step through it just to show you how it works. So, I'm presented with the wizard, and I skip the first couple of pages so that I can see the environments that are listed. And as a user or an administrator, I can see in this page all of the environments that are visible to me and make a selection. And once I've chosen one, Business Central is going to restart the session, and it's going to be connected to the new environment, and I'll be able to create flows and request approval flows in this new environment. So if you'd like to learn more about how to integrate Power Platform with Business Central, then there's a variety of resources that are displayed on screen now. So there's lots of opportunities to engage with us. If you have any questions, you could submit them via Yammer, you can submit your ideas via BC Ideas, or join our office hours where we're doing a deep dive into different aspects of the product. So thank you everybody for listening, and we're really looking forward to see what you build with these new Power Platform features.
Thank you.